Hey everyone, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio. And my name is Jake Anderson. I'm going to be your host. We got a special, kind of a behemoth of a show tonight. We have a very cool, amazing activist, Derrick Broze, is going to be joining us. And then in hour two, we have some other special guests that will be talking about the very disturbing issue of human trafficking, as well as some other issues. And here to help me weed through it is our almighty Lord and Savior, DB Schwartz. DB, how you doing tonight?
Hey, brother. Doing good. I'm getting ready to head on a trip for a little bit tomorrow, and probably won't be calling in for at least probably a couple weeks, but maybe not. Maybe we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's the time difference.
That's what you said last time, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, but things happen in my line of business where if something good happens, you end up having to stay. So I'm not really complaining, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, well, I'm here for an extra week. So it was cool. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about. I think that what we're seeing with Trump with this healthcare thing, with it looking like it's going to be really, really bad and affect everybody I mean, let's put it this way. If you're making $100,000 a year, life is getting better because there's more choices. But if you're not, life's not getting better because you're kind of now being forced into doing things that you can't possibly afford. It's not like competition's breaking up any monopolies. It's just, I don't know, I guess it's opening them up to deny care, which was the best part of Obamacare, which was that they couldn't deny care to anyone. Did it suck? Premiums were going up? Yes, it sucked. But I mean, the inevitable thing is that we go to single payer. If we're gonna have government at all, why wouldn't we use them to take care of our basic needs and necessities so that we didn't die, go broke, go bankrupt, be put out on the streets, and you know, the basic things we all need.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. I mean, there's a lot of people that are very upset right now that I'm seeing on Facebook. A lot of friends of mine, a friend that has cystic fibrosis, female friends who have been raped, who are worried about Planned Parenthood. This is a very, very touchy subject, and it's divisive, and this is the kind of shit that keeps us from looking at bigger issues, some of which I want to talk about with Derrick. But it's important, and I'm gonna ask him, how he would envision a healthcare system in an anarchist system or an agorist system, because it's complex. We have over 300 million people in this country. And a lot of them, many people have disabilities. We have pre-existing conditions. I personally, I'm a little worried about how mental health will be treated on this. I deal with depression and chronic, and I mean, I have a much better situation than a lot of people. But I think, obviously, there's some much bigger issues going on here, but I think people are justified in being scared about whether their health care is going to cover a pre-existing condition that could, let's be honest, these things can bankrupt people. You can very, very easily go bankrupt from a single illness. I mean, you can go bankrupt from a broken leg. I mean, much less a cancer diagnosis.
Well, what is it? What's the most common organ that people get removed because you don't need it anymore? Appendicitis, correct? And how many people? I mean, I personally know one who she had to have it removed. Her hospital bill was $130,000. This was prior to Obamacare. She did not have insurance. She went bankrupt, and what is this now? I think it's finally off of her credit, but thankfully, she married a guy that had sparkling credit, and they just put it all under his name. But otherwise, your life gets put on hold for 7 years. You don't buy a car. You don't buy a house. You don't take on really even student debt without getting murdered on the interest. And it's simply because you got sick. And again, if we're going to have government at all, we need to force them to give us things like single payer.
Yeah, if we're gonna have if there's going to be an overarching government structure that controls our lives to a certain extent, it should at the very least provide uh, basic things humans need in order to grow, and that would be healthcare, education, internet access. I mean, these are things that, and look, we're about to have a tried and true anarchist on the show, so we're about to get really deep into this issue. But for God's sakes, I mean, if we're going to have, right now, we've talked about this before, we basically have uh, socialist bailouts for the rich and privatized capitalism for the poor. And it's wrong. Like it's if you're poor in this country, you're fucked. And if you're a minority, you can be extra fucked. And, this is let's be honest, this is whatever your views on abortion are, this is part of a long-standing attack against reproductive rights and women's rights. And, this is the liberal side of me coming out. I do have an anarchist side of me. But when it comes to Planned Parenthood, man, it's just let people get the reproductive health care they need. If it's a right, if you really want to believe in freedom, whether you're anarchist, whether you're statist or whatnot, if you think humans deserve to be free, they have the right to control their body, and they sure as hell have a right to get contraceptives if they want them, and IUDs and things like that. And this attack.
God forbid we don't have more and more kids, and I hate, dude, trust me, I hate that people feel that they need to do an abortion and not have an adoption, because I am adopted and so are my siblings.
Really?
And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And honestly, nobody wants to force anybody into that situation at all. And it sucks if you made a mistake or things didn't go as planned, or God forbid, if you were raped, then by any means necessary, you should be able to do what you have to do to heal from that event. If that means having the abortion, so be it. But what I want to just kind of get into is, we're busting at the seams as far as you can see. I mean, we really are. We're taking on a lot of immigrants in this country, and we can feed them, and we can pull in probably a couple 100 million more. But things are going to get dicey here soon, even for us. And if you go travel to a legitimate third world, and I hate that term, but if you travel to a place where their infrastructure cannot support their population due to whatever reason, it's kind of, we take it for granted here because we didn't get bombed out in World War II, and we didn't lose. We're still running on the infrastructure that was in place before World War II in a lot of ways. So, we take it for granted. And I just want to say, man, it can go away at any time. It really can. And it's dependent on things running smoothly and a renewal process. And the renewal process, unfortunately, for this country has always been war. And I think we're starting to see that again, just to get the economy going,
Yeah, I think I have no doubt in my mind that there will be a war of some kind during Trump's years. That's, war and natural disasters are the biggest money makers. I'm reading the Secret History of the American Empire, and he talks about, how big of a moneymaker natural disasters are, and about how the tsunami in the Philippines, about how economic hitmen and the corporate vultures swooped in on that and made a killing and basically shut down any kind of reform that was happening there. And, they thrive, the people in control, they thrive on war, they thrive on natural disaster. Let's be honest.
Did you say you're reading one of those, Jake? Do you have a hardcover?
I do, yeah. Well, I have
a soft
cover, yeah.
Okay, because if you had a first edition hardcover, they're up there in the hundreds, if not thousands now.
What? Worth that amount?
Yeah. There's certain things that are considered like books of extreme knowledge, and I kid you not, they are so heavily edited and redacted by the second edition and the soft covers. If you can find the first edition hardcover of that, or the Grand Chessboard, there's a lot of those kind of if you buy the first edition hardcover before they get cut up, they're fascinating, man.
I would
And
imagine
especially
any of the Howard Zinn books
yeah,
will probably be up there as well. Probably
yeah,
no
Chomsky's.
No Logo by Naomi Klein,
Yep.
which for a while was basically like my Bible.
It owls. I mean, dude, a
Yeah.
lot of these soldiers get away with murder on that first edition when editors are just like, you know what, this is great, we're gonna put it through, and then it sells out, right? And then it gets reviewed, and a critic reviews it and says, you know, there's some questionable stuff in here, and then lo and behold, that publisher, by the time that second edition's out, it's heavily edited already, and the author's never told, and they could care less by then because they're getting rich off it.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a great book. I mean, it's dense, so I'm taking my time with it, and but it's you know, the guy, you know, he got rich off of the books and whatnot. But you know, it took some courage for him to come out. I mean, we certainly need more whistleblowers across the board right now. I mean, this is a scary time for whistleblowers. But you know, it's pretty cool to have an operative from deep inside the deep state come out and basically is waging an all-out campaign against it. And you know, let's face it, knowledge is the number one weapon we have right now. We can't beat them with guns. We can't beat them with missiles. All we can beat them with is generational knowledge being passed down across decades and decades and decades. And you know,
And we're at a weird, we're like the only country where we're at a weird impasse where the government can't beat us with guns without having to destroy the entire infrastructure because we're armed. So we're like at this impasse that's basically it's stalemating and delaying this global governance project that's been in place since the end of World War II and really truly right before JFK ate it, right in '62 era, right in that time frame when they came out with the Iron Mountain, the Iron Mountain Report, if I'm not mistaken. And all this stuff ties in, Jake, with the economic hitman. Excuse me, to control the world's assets. You know, you can do it through brute force, but they tried. You know, it was tried in World War II, and it was shown that you know a whole bunch of people died, and a whole bunch of things got bombed out and destroyed, and you know a lot of the places in the world got set back for a decade or more. You know, China especially took them a long time to recover because they were at war since like 33 to 53. So China was at war literally for 2 decades.
well, it's done primarily through the IMF. You know, they use the IMF and they conscript these third world countries into taking on these massive loans for infrastructure, and then they basically own the country. I mean, that's been the formula for the past half century.
Only to countries that need that help, though. That's where the stalemate is. It's like, what do you do with Russia? Because Russia doesn't need anything. Does the average Russian citizen live a good life? Probably not, but they're surviving. So it's not like you can really like create some kind of like color revolution there. It's been tried and it just doesn't work. So you can't really starve them out either because they can grow food. It's just, you know, it's potatoes and wheat and whatever. So they're not getting this variety, but they're kind of invulnerable. You can't invade them or really do anything to them except sanction them and just make the average person's life even more miserable. But the big thing is China. Like, what do you do with them? They're our size, but they have 4 times the people, and they're running out of arable land, which is actually going to put pressure on their neighbors to either feed them cheap and power them cheap, or start to literally get their land annexed. I mean, Russia just took Crimea. Why couldn't China take North Vietnam if they needed it?
Right. Yeah, big issue there with China, big issue with Russia. I mean, we have a geopolitical nightmare on our hands here, and I think it's high time. I think American citizens, they really have to start, you know, taking inventory of their role in the world, their role as a citizen. And and this is what we're going to talk about here in a little bit with Derrick Broze. We need a new way of building and sustaining communities in this country, and we can't all be reliant on this corporatocracy, because what happens is that they are basically given a mandate to do what they're doing all around the world. They know damn well, the state knows damn well that the majority of Americans at this point in time are psychologically and financially dependent on the state, and they are afraid because of the propaganda that's gone into the war on terror. People are, scared, and every time there's a new terrorist attack, even though very few Americans have died from a terrorist attack, they're, kind of goaded into thinking that the state is necessary for those things. Now, there's all variety of different kinds of anarchists, and we're going to get into this with Derrick. But I think at the very least, people really should start considering, organizing at the local level, and, organizing based upon what you want to consume. Do you want to consume labor that was created by children in sweatshop factories? Or do you want to, well, best of all, create your own produce and your own products?
And that's really, Jake, in Oregon, I'm sure it's similar to here, because for whatever reason, there's certain cities where people are like more self-reliant or crafty. And up here, it's definitely like that. And I know it's like that by you, but like people are meeting their own demands themselves or through their neighbors, because a lot of neighbors are super good at certain things, and you're like, I'm going to go to the store, but you know what? Now we have Nextdoor, and that's like way better than Facebook. It's like neighborhood Facebook, where you use your actual face and name and your address. Is that scary? Kind of, but everybody can see everybody else, and you can't get in until you're like verified. So is it kind of creepy? Sure. But at the same time, people are like, hey, I need a dresser and I have $10. Anybody selling? Boom, it's done, and it's like 5 minutes away. We're starting to organize like cookouts. Why? Because 20 people can buy half of whatever kind of an animal you can think of, and we can cook it up and save a ton of money and bring home a ton of food. And that's the thing, Jake. There's a huge demand. There's more demand than before the economy went sour. It's just people aren't making money. They're finding ways to get around it because they want to, because they can, because technology is allowing it. Nobody buys cable anymore. We have
all these new ways of monetizing and organizing things. And that's one of the things, that we're going to talk about here, is kind of decentralized currency and whatnot. But our guest now, he's a writer he wrote for Mint Press News. He's written for Activist Post. He writes for the Anti-Media. He is the founder of the Houston Freethinkers, the author of a trilogy of books called The Conscious Resistance, a very prolific activist, and someone I respect greatly. Derrick Broze, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, thanks for being here. And I know you're busy as a bee right now. You're organizing your Decentralize Your Life tour. And you actually recently taken a little bit of a break from social media because it's stressful, for one. But you're a prolific poster. And one thing I like about you a lot is that you're predominantly positive and looking for solutions. But certainly, burnout is an issue for you, especially for activists of all kinds. So what do you do, taking this little break from social media? Is this part of a way to avoid burnout? Or, do you think it's important for activists to, be mentally healthy when they're taking on this incredible challenge that we're facing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I would take regular social media breaks probably ideally every 1 to 2 to 3 months. But then recently I've realized, oh crap, I haven't taken a break in over 6 months, and I'm definitely a very busy person. I don't use social media. I think most of us don't use social media like the quote unquote average person, in the sense of just posting periodically and posting about the weather or sports or your family or whatever, but we're actively posting and using social media as a tool to try to engage the world and spread information. And in addition to that, I'm also really involved in my community. So I'm constantly using social media to promote ideas and events and information, articles, things like that. And it definitely is helpful to take a step back every now and then, because it can be a bit overwhelming. The constant engagement, we also know plenty of information now about how social media affects our mood, how we can be affected by the atmosphere, the themes that are expressed on social media and the way that we take those in. So it's definitely important to step back, kind of get in tune with yourself, stay a little bit more centered, and maybe just remembering the days of what it was like to not have constant engagement through the internet. And for me, even more so, I've only had a smartphone since this past September, and it came through journalism, like Mint Press News wanting me to pay me to do live streams through Facebook when I was out at events like in Standing Rock and stuff. So I was like, all right, I guess I got to get a smartphone. So I don't know, that's what's October, November, December, January, just over 6 months or so. And I just, along with this social media break, a part of it is just like deleting the apps off my phone, because I realized like, wow, now that I have this smartphone, before I just had a dumb phone, and so I couldn't be on Facebook 24/7. It was just like when I would get to a computer, which was already a whole lot, but now it's even more so just in my pocket, which is the whole reason I didn't want the smartphone, because I was already like, oh, I'm already addicted to the internet. I'll be even more so if it's like right in my pocket. And it's been extremely helpful, of course. It has its ups, just like its downs, but I do think it's important and valuable to unplug. And, a big part of my message is promoting tools like meditation and other tools for self-reflection, whether that's, just a good group therapy session, a good conversation with somebody, a psychedelic therapy session, or what have you. But taking the time to connect to yourself and center yourself, find out what exactly it is that you're fighting for in this world, getting to know yourself on a deeper level. And that has profound impacts on our own individual paths, as well as I think the path of the world as a whole. If more people did that and got to know themselves a little bit better, we'd probably be in a different situation than we are today. So it has value, unplugging from social media, getting to spend some time with your family, or just really connecting with yourself, and not so much of this constant interaction. Because it really is mind-boggling, how just in 25 years or so, it's gone from it was acceptable to leave messages on people's answering machines, and you might hear from them next week or something, to now it's like somebody sends you a text message or a Facebook message or something like that on social media, and you're just like, why haven't they responded in like 10 minutes or something? And I feel like as whatever society is, as this kind of collective, there does seem to be, and maybe this is being pushed on us and we're just kind of passively accepting it, but there does seem to be some sort of societal pressure to respond at much more of a quicker pace than there was in the past. And maybe that's just the way some of us are living, because I definitely know there are those who are, I think of like my grandmother on her farm in Kentucky, and when I get to go spend time with her, I just spend a couple of weeks, and it's just this totally other pace of lifestyle, and it's so much comfort. It's so comforting, just like waking up in the morning, having tea on the patio, going and checking on the chickens and the cows, and just this totally, but it's great. I love it. And it's, we're the exact opposite of that when we're just plugged into social media constantly. So yeah, it's just interesting. I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but the way social media and all that affects our lives, it's important to evaluate that and to step back every now and then. So I do these periodic spiritual retreats from social media, and it's long overdue, because as I said, I haven't really taken a break since before Standing Rock, 3 trips out there, and then just got super busy, and just the book release and planning for this tour and everything. So it's been busy, and it's good to step back a little bit. So other than this interview, I'm pretty much trying to just unplug.
Yeah. Well, thanks for getting back. I think you got back online just for me, man. But no, just kidding.
Are you telling us that we are experiencing like your Chappelle moment?
Hopefully not as extreme as that.
Derrick, I subscribe to your positive affirmations email list. That's another thing you do, and I've frequently gotten a nice lift to my day with that. But let's talk about your tour, the Decentralize Your Life tour, because I want to talk about agorism. I want to talk about freedom cells, and I think both of those things are, of course, enfolded into this tour. You're going to like dozens and dozens of cities, and you're really doing a pretty incredible thing. I mean, it's almost like a concert tour, except it's about activism and anarchism and reclaiming local communities and meditation and all these things. Summarize a little bit about what this tour is about.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm really excited about this, man, because since I put it out there, I'm the kind of person that just likes to really, I mean, I talk about manifestation, and I really believe that, not in some sort of airy way, but in the most literal sense of taking your thoughts and really empowering yourself and knowing that, like, all right, I'm going to create this outcome. I'm going to put everything I've got into it and take all the necessary steps to making that become a reality, and really believing nothing less and putting in nothing less than that. And so when I get ideas like that and I feel that sort of fire behind it, I'm like, yeah, this is something I have to do. I really do that. I put everything I've got into it. And this tour is definitely one of those projects. And, freedom cells, as you said, agorism, these concepts are essential and integral to this tour, which really makes me happy, because since I've started to talk about these concepts, which I'll elaborate on in a moment, in the last year and a half or so, I've gotten emails and just contacts from people all around the world who are working on similar concepts, similar ideas, working in community groups and building local power. And they may call it a different name, or they don't have a name for it, or what have you, but they understand, what I'm going for, and they want to connect. And we've really been seeing some great responses. So the tour is called the Decentralize Your Life Tour. It's now officially sponsored by Bitcoin.com, which is Bitcoin cryptocurrency, of course, is a big part of the whole decentralized message. And the reason I went with that message is because everything that I've been promoting through this tour and promoting in the release of my most recent book, Manifesto of the Free Humans, it has to do with that concept of decentralization. And whether you're talking about decentralization in the terms of economic systems, so you've got cryptocurrency, barter, or other forms of alternative local currencies that can compete with the status mainstream currency, whether you're talking about decentralizing your food production systems by supporting community grow ops and backyard gardens and urban farming and things like that, decentralizing in the sense of community defense rather than relying on state police and things like that. We create community watch groups and neighborhood watches and what have you. And so taking that concept and applying it in all areas of our life and really giving the people back the power in the most literal sense, that's what the tour is about. And the Conscious Resistance, which is my website, theconsciousresistance.com, and the name of the book series, the trilogy of books that we just completed, is centered around much of the concepts that you already mentioned, Jake, is meditation, agorism, freedom, building community, building. It's all about empowerment. What it comes down to me. My message is really just about empowering individuals to realize just the capabilities that they have, the potential that lies within them, and from that standpoint, building more empowered individuals who recognize that same power in all the other people around them, realizing that we've got communities all around full of beautifully powerful people capable of vast different skills and knowledge that we can come together and unify on various issues, various common ground fronts, and create local power, community power that can be diverse, it can be unique, but it can also be a network, and this is what we call the Freedom Cell Network. So essentially, the concept of Freedom Cells is something that I've been working with a couple other activists and really with people here in Houston through the Houston Freethinkers, which is the activist community I helped start in 2010. I live in the Freethinker House with two other guys, and this is the space for the Houston Freethinkers where we host documentary screenings. We have benefit shows, working with local bands and raise money for survivors of human trafficking, or working with Food Not Bombs, or whatever sort of
you grow vegetables there too. I look at all your posts, man. It looks like you have a really incredible community going there.
No, I mean, I feel blessed. I love it. It's the result of a lot of hard work over the last 7 years, and just we'll still be out there on the streets if there's a need, if it really feels necessary, when it comes to confronting power or doing this and that. But I can honestly say that after holding meetings and hosting events in the Houston area community, working with tons of different activist groups and raising, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars independently, we're not a nonprofit or anything like that. We just do things, and then we give the money to people who need it, or we work where we're needed. Less and less people are coming to get involved, saying we want to go to the street and hold a sign, we want to go protest or march outside this building. When that's necessary, again, there's a time and a place for that. But more and more people are coming and saying we want to learn how to take care of ourselves, we want to grow our own food, we want to do things like that. So the group and the community has become more centered on those type of things. So we have documentary screenings, we go out and do outreach where we might go pass out flyers or information on a particular topic that's important at that time, whether that means informing people about the lies of the war against Syria or something more local, just whatever the people involved who are this Houston Freethinkers, because essentially it's just an idea, it's a website, it's a Facebook page, and there's those of us who live here, but the Houston Freethinkers is an idea, and whoever shows up to the meetings, whoever shows up to the events that we host, those are the Houston Freethinkers. And that, includes everything from, as you said, we have a community garden here at the house, a pretty reasonably sized garden right here in the heart of the city, showing people how to do urban farming and growing their own food and becoming more independent. We've been connecting to farmers markets. We also do things like, just hosting like kickball games and picnics at the park and inviting anybody out, kind of like a open potluck, come hang out and have fun at the park, and subtly get people involved with hey, this is what we do. This is the community that we're involved in, and we're all trying to find ways to better ourselves and better our community. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. And over time, as I got into the philosophy of agorism, which comes from Samuel Konkin III in his book, New Libertarian Manifesto and Agorist Primer, both of which are free online, I'm sure, and I definitely recommend people check those out for more in depth than I'm going to discuss. But it's essentially a philosophy, market anarchism philosophy that he espoused, a strategy and a philosophy that was his ideas on how we could get from the place we are now, tyranny, statism, not freedom, towards freedom, or what he called agorism, which comes from the Greek word agora for the marketplace. And he really espoused this idea that we could create a free society not by challenging the establishment through voting or believing that we could have some kind of insurrection and violent revolution, but that we should build counter institutions, counter power to the state, specifically through his strategy that was known as counter economics. And he was coming of age and influence in the mid 60s, so he was around whenever the New Left and the hippie movement was coming out as well. That was also kind of the beginning of a lot of the more radical libertarians, which are sometimes American libertarians right now, Murray Rothbard and those folk. He was around during that time, but he was a little bit more to the left of those guys. So he took some influence with some of their ideas, but then kind of created this own thing that he called New Libertarianism or agorism. And counter economics was the idea that we would just siphon economic power away from the state. So rather than continuing to use the Federal Reserve note or the US dollar or whatever sort of status currency you have in your country, you work outside of that by using alternative currencies, pretty much what we were describing already, cryptocurrency, barter networks, anything that takes tax money and also moral support away from the state, and then redirects that into, specifically with an agorist mindset, redirects that into new community institutions that can challenge and rival the state. So, some people talk about voluntarism and creating a voluntary society where we don't have the force of government, but we can still fund and support community projects and things. They would just be funded voluntarily by people who choose to. So he sort of talked about the same vision. So we take power away from the state by tax resistance, by using alternative currencies, by not by working in the peaceful black and gray markets in the areas that they say are either unregulated or untaxed or illegal. So essentially your cannabis dealer, your local cannabis dealer, he might not realize it yet, but he's a revolutionary, or at least he's one step away from being it if he adds a little bit of philosophy to his game. Right now, he might just be practicing the counter economy. He's selling cannabis, doing something that the state considers to be illegal. Where an agorist takes that action and that situation and understands that there is some revolutionary potential in there if they consciously do that service, which is a service to people who choose to ingest cannabis or whatever other service they might want, that the state says is illegal or immoral. If that person then takes that money and says uses it to funnel power away from the state, but to reinvest it into local community projects, whether that is things like Food Not Bombs or community protection, things like that. So Konkin outlined his vision in this, and he talked about society going through 4 phases. And I was really influenced and been really influenced by his work over the years. And he really didn't write a whole lot. It's just these 2 books. He's got a lot of newsletters that you can find some copies of online, and various essays and articles and things like that. But for the most part, there's not this wealth of material on it. And that's partly because the whole philosophy of agorism, like there's a saying, anarchy, agora, and action. He was all about consistency and basically taking action and saying, like, this is the truth. This is libertarianism in the sense of like freedom of individuality, anti-statism, anti-authoritarianism to its fullest extent was what he believed was agorism was. It was most consistent. It's, so you don't vote, you don't participate in their systems. So he was totally against the Libertarian Party when it was created in the 70s. And he was really just constantly talking crap to them until his death in 2004. So he was really big influence, and I love his ideas, but he never really put the mechanism that we would move between these phases. He talked about phase 0. There's not a lot of freedom-minded people. Then phase 1, and then kind of described the phases society would go through. And in my new book, Manifesto of the Free Humans, me and my co-author, John Vibes, who also has written for the Anti-Media and Free Thought Project and others, we wanted to create a book that could be as close to a guidebook for how to escape, how to vacate the state, how to create strong, empowered communities, and how to help the rest of this agorist vision come into action. Because some of the things that he predicted when he wrote the book, computers were just like very, very, very early days, but he could already tell, like many people, that technology was going to have a huge role in the way that we viewed government and the fight for freedom. And I think that's really still an ongoing thing. So it's been really interesting. And we wanted to take this concept of freedom cells, which is just small groups of people coming together in their community, working on common goals, common tasks to assert their individual sovereignty as well as the collective power of the group. And I believe this is the mechanism that allows one to move from phase 0, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, as Konkin predicted, as society, as the state's unsustainable nature reveals itself, people start to lose drop their moral support for the state. The state has to continue to inflate the currency to try to fund all its programs, and eventually, as we've seen, and this is going on in Venezuela and other nations as well, where we see breakdowns and economic collapse and such. So he predicted, this sort of thing would happen in the U.S. or really any state, and it's up to the people to be proactive and to create the counter economy now, so that we can already be working on other currencies that and essentially kind of weather the downfall of the current empire, and not only just survive it, but thrive through it and help many other people. So the idea with Freedom Cells is getting 8 to 10 people, ideally 8, and there's some research on the basis of why this number 8 works great with people. Essentially, that groups that are too small are limited in their capabilities, while groups that are too many people can be a little bit too much conflict or too difficult to manage when it comes to specific tasks. So 8 is a number that has, and you can find this in various research. I get it from a guy named Bob Podolsky, who wrote a book called Flourish, and it comes from his research. So we took some of the ideas from there and applied it to the agorist philosophy. And you imagine a group of 8 people who are interested in sharing skills, sharing knowledge, being able to be responsive, a support team, a support system for people closest in their community. So through the Houston Freethinkers, I realized that we were already doing these ideas. And once the Freedom Cell concept came to me and I heard about this idea, I realized that we were essentially doing that already through the Houston Freethinkers, through the way that we operate just naturally. But now, and more intently in the last year and a half, we've really focused, me and the guys here in the house, where one of my roommates now in the last 6 months that we've been living in this third version of the Freethinker house has gone from working a status day job that he hated, that made him miserable, working, having credit cards and bank accounts, to totally quitting all that stuff. And now, just within the last week, now he had his last day at work and is now just jumping totally into the counter economy. And we're using him as the guinea pig to show people, like, here's somebody that's going to move from totally plugged in to a more free way of finding multiple sources of revenue and of income that can support the lifestyle they want and can also be consistent with the principles and the things that they want to espouse.
That's amazing, man. And that's exactly the next point I wanted to talk about. Was for most people, when they hear, and by the way, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, that was like a clinic in agorism. And we're just getting started. And by the way, everyone should go to, if you could afford it, go to patreon.com/Derrick Broze, donate to his cause, buy the Conscious Resistance books. I am a big fan.
Is John Vibe still fighting the good fight? And should we throw his stuff too? Does he have a GoFundMe, or how's he?
His co-author is struggling with sickness right now, and I've donated twice to him, but our thoughts are with him, and I know he's a close friend of yours, so I know that's a difficult situation as well. We'll post a link to John Vibe's GoFundMe. One of the things with anarchism, with anarchy especially, when you talk to the average person, and, most of my friends are liberals, a lot of people that with the anti-media group are more on the libertarian right. But the first thing you get when you talk about anarchy is, oh, it's impossible. There's no way it could ever happen. And so one of the things I like about what you're doing and the way you approach agorism is that it seems like you're breaking it down into actionable steps that people can actually take. And of course, you're smart enough that you realize that a big part of that is breaking through the cognitive dissonance that's going on with the media. And so you're very savvy at using social media to break through that cognitive dissonance. What do you think the role is? And I hope we have time I want to talk about the future of technology, specifically transhumanism and how that could play into the future. But right now, do you think social media is a major role in breaking through the cognitive dissonance to let people know that there are alternatives to relying on the state? Is that a big issue for you?
Well, I do think that social media to some degree will play a role. Obviously I use it in that manner, and I think those of us who are active in the independent media, especially the really active internet-based media, I mean, it's been so incredible to see the effects that we've had in the last 5 years in shaping conversation and getting people to pay attention to what's going on. Obviously, there's always more work to do, and there's a lot more people to reach. There's a lot of people that are still indoctrinated with the dead stream media, but we have had an effect, and I think that's a beautiful thing to see. And I have actually, I'm kind of betting on the fact that social media is going to play a role, because one of the things that and I did mention this a moment ago, but one of the things that we're doing as far as trying to grow these ideas is we've created our own social network at freedomcells.org. I really want to recommend everyone to check out freedomcells.org. That's CELLS, like the cells in your body. And it's basically a social network that takes some of the concepts that we see with Facebook and other social media, but then also adds this element that was really, I've just been honored to work with some great people. As I said, when I put the idea out there and I started talking about Freedom Cells, which, just a quick side note, if anyone wants to go to youtube.com/conscious resistance, go check out our playlist. There's a whole playlist on Freedom Cells and all the videos I've done there, talking about different angles, different ways to use the concept, working in small groups with people, and the ways it can be used for defense, for growing food, for knowledge sharing, for skill sharing, and all that. So please check that out. And you can also see that at freedomcells.org. But it's essentially a social network where you can post, just like you can anything else. You can post videos and this and that. But the goal of it, the hope is that we're creating a new network that allows individuals to meet and connect with other like-minded people, and then from there create real-world relationships and connections to actually start Freedom Cells in in the physical world, because what the website does, it allows you to sign up, and just like any other social media profile, you can put what you want about yourself, like all that basic stuff. But there's also this sort of barometer where you can put a sliding scale of where your skills are, what you have to offer, what your interests are, and then in that account, like what thing you can post, like things for sale and trade and barter directly with other people. But the best part is that you can search within 5 miles of you, 10 miles of you, 50 miles of you, and it'll show you all the people who have joined the Freedom Cell Network and where they are in relation to where you are. And this is in the hopes that people will actually create these real world relationships. I mean, I just got off the phone with a friend earlier from Massachusetts, and she was saying that she hadn't been on in a little while, and she tries to get on once a week or so and check it out. And just in the last week or so, she's noticed there's been a lot more people joining in. She's met 2 new people from her area, that she never knew before, who are activists in their own right and working towards some of the same goals that she is. So we're already seeing this effect of bringing people together, because I think it's great that we can get people to share memes, thousands of times, and we can get hundreds of thousands of likes and all this, and millions of likes and such. But I want to be able to motivate people to take real world steps, real world action. And that's what is so important about Agorism, is it's all about action, and Freedom Cells is the mechanism to create that action. And of course, we can't ignore the social media. We can't ignore the internet. So we wanted to tap into that as well and create our own social network. So absolutely, I do think that social networks have the power to communicate a message. There's always the danger that we're just talking in echo chambers, and we're just isolating ourselves further and further, especially with the algorithms that they're creating. And I mean, I've thought about this over and over. It's like it's getting more difficult to reach newer people. I mean, we see spikes, and a certain issue pops up, and then people become interested in what's going on in the world, and then they go digging and they find us and stuff. But often it does feel like we're hitting an echo chamber, or just I refer to it as a circle jerk sometimes. But that's why I want to try to use it to motivating people to connect, because what's more important for me, as much as I love all the activists that I've met through social media, and how spread out we are around the country and around the world. That's great, but when I'm hosting events and I need things going on in my community and I need help for some issue in my community, you guys can only do so much, and I can only do so much for you. So I believe that we should really start trying to foster those relationships within our own communities, because if things continue down the pattern that they are, and the state continues to use patriotism and nationalism to rile people up, we're going to be facing a situation where we're not only having to fight off agents of the state, but the people who are blindly obedient and hypnotized and indoctrinated by the state. So yeah. It behooves us to have friendly, like minds in our communities, in our neighborhoods, on our streets, be close with those people. And that's what we're trying to do with the Freedom Cell Network. And there's also networks like Nextdoor.com is another one that we talk about that in the book that I recommend, because it's a private social network for your neighborhood. It's kind of the same thing. You can look for people who are just in your single specific neighborhood, or like the 5 neighborhoods around you. So you can kind of widen your scope, and you can post message boards like, hey, lost dog, this. Or what we do is we're like, hey, we're growing food. We have kale for sale. We have kombucha for sale. And we get to sell directly, again, in the gray market. There's no taxes involved. That's just it's just doing cash exchanges with them, and in some cases trying to introduce these people in our neighborhood to Bitcoin and to other cryptocurrency, because that we need to create that economy and that culture in our neighborhoods, in our own streets. So these new apps and social networks like Nextdoor.com and freedomcells.org, I believe, are going to be a part of the way to make social networks start kind of feeding back into the real world, instead of just being something that we escape to, but it's something that helps connect us to the physical world even more so than we already are.
Right now, just to touch upon a couple of current issues, and I know you're engaged with it, but right now we see the state tactics of divide and conquer being used more fervently than ever. Right now there's this Antifa versus alt-right debate that's going on, and it's difficult to even find a rational way of approaching it right now, because there's so much irrational anger, so much frustration, and obviously this is the failure of the corporatocracy and the failure of the state to provide a workable solution. But we have people that disagree about the police. We have people that disagree about, property and taxation. What do you think is a way, and coming from a background of stressing the importance of community, with this current battle, it's almost a civil war at this point, at least rhetorically, with the alt-right. What do you, and I see you fighting with them every day on Facebook in the comments. What is as an anarchist, but as an anarchist, I don't think you like labels very much. I saw you in a debate between an ANCOM and an ANCAP, and you don't seem like you like a label very much when it comes to anarchy. But what do you think the most realistic way? I talk all the time on here about how we need a coalition of alt-left and alt-right who agree on common principles like no war, no drug war, issues like that. What do you think? Is there a way for us to bridge people together, even people that viciously disagree on certain issues? For example, one of your chapters in your book is about, can people who don't believe in property and people who believe in property, can they coexist? I read that chapter. In terms of a broad strategy, how can we get people that hate each other so fervently to agree with each other on some core principles?
Yeah, this is definitely was an interesting chapter of the book to write. John and I just sat around in his little cabin in the woods, just doing some thought experiments and trying to figure out, okay, how do we feel about this, and is this realistic and such. And yeah, it's become even more timely, I guess, because of this growing divide. And I do think the divide obviously exists in the sense of the Antifa, alt-left, extreme left, and the kind of new alt-right, extreme right, that includes some various white supremacist elements. And not that everybody in there is a white supremacist, but there's some strong nationalism that seems to be popping up here in the United States that maybe we haven't seen in some time. Or at least if we've seen it before, these elements are now feeling even more safe than they have in the past to come out openly. And when you look at Berkeley and you look at some of these other cities and these conflicts, which personally, as a journalist and as a writer, I don't even want to give any of that stuff my attention. Honestly, I feel like we're wasting our time by going out there and putting 1,000 cameras around these people. It's just. If for one, it creates this illusion that there's more to that than there is, because honestly, I feel like there's people who are, I don't want to say center, because it's not necessarily that we're the centrists where we're not choosing a side one way or the other, but the extremists are trying to say you're either with us or you're against us, and this is on the left and the right, where the extreme left is like, no free speech, hate speech doesn't need to be protected, and they're willing to silence political opponents and by any means necessary. And the extreme right is like, well, if you don't defend our freedom of speech, no matter how ugly it is, then you're just a commie, you're just a leftist, this, that. So it's just getting people who are trying to stay sane among all this are kind of, where do I stand? How do I make a choice? What do I do? And it's a difficult place to be. I think that we should stay close to our principles. Those who know where they stand, they shouldn't be swayed by the whims of politicians and by the trends that sweep through the nation, because these trends are going to come and go, and these extreme elements, they always exist. Maybe historically they get their moments in the light, but I don't think that they ultimately matter in the end. It is difficult, and like you said, I do give it some time on social media, because it really has blown my mind to some degree to see activists that I've worked with on the internet and some in person over the last 6 or 7 years that I thought were, quote unquote, awake or aware of what was going on. And now to see them go like alt-right or like pro-Trump or white nationalist or just these different things, I'm like, whoa, where did you go? What happened to you? And then even some who maybe that I worked with that are more on the left side get, as a reaction to this, become more extreme in their stances, and I think that this push to become more and more extreme, it's only going to lead to a dangerous place. It's only going to lead to things getting more extreme, and we're already seeing these people just go face to face in the street and scream at each other like children, and in fist fights and all these kind of things that I don't think ultimately serve our purposes. I mean, I oppose bigotry in all its forms, and I oppose racism and things like that. And I think that we should use freedom of speech to try to confront those people. And I know Antifa and some other extreme left say, well, in the past, fascists haven't listened to open debate, and free speech didn't stop them, so now we have to stop them by any means necessary. I don't think that fear is the greatest motivator. This may put those people in hiding, and if that's your goal, is just to make them go hide away, then maybe you achieve that for a certain period of time. But it seems like it's something that's going to be an ongoing battle, whereas I like to take the approach of trying to communicate with people. This is the other big part of the message is using nonviolent communication and other methods of trying to connect with people. And granted, it's not going to work with everybody. There's some thick-headed people on both sides, all sides of debates. But for me and my historical research of various revolutionary movements and trying to understand how to move towards a place that can achieve some sense of balance, you got to see that often people become the monsters that they say that they're fighting. They use violence or they use tactics to achieve their goals, and in the end they become worse than what they're fighting, or they become that very thing. And I'm really, really focused on not allowing that to happen and continuing to promote a consistent message. So I think, and along with that, we have to be careful not to allow ourselves to be so divided, because this is why, it blows my mind, honestly, man. This is why it's so frustrating, because I'm like, you guys can't see this? Like, you really, on one side to the Trump supporters, I'm like, you really think after all that knowledge, all that stuff that you guys talked about, all these different documentaries you watch and everything you've been saying about Obama for the last 8 years, and some of you even about Bush, like, you really think some billionaire guy just snuck through and totally took these people by surprise, and now he's just leading this political revolution? That just blows my mind that people actually buy that narrative. And then, that allows those people to be like, he's the outsider, the media hates him and this and that. And then the other side, the left and the people who oppose him, they're offended by everything he says. They feel emboldened. They feel like it's time for them to stand up and take action, and they must come to the streets. And it just feeds into this energy of this, I think, just continuing a cycle that we've seen more and more. So I try to comment on it a little bit here and there, both in the book and on social media. But
we're running up against the clock here. Derrick, I want to thank you so much. I wish we could talk for another 3 hours. Thank you so much, man. Much love.
Thanks, Derrick.
Really respect all the work you're doing, man. Everyone, check out his work. Stay tuned for the next hour.
We got a second hour coming up here.
Once again, Derrick, thank you so much, man. I respect it.
I thank you guys.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.